Hi, Eric Lanask here. We're in Las Vegas at Wearable Tech Expo, and I'm talking with Bahram Nur Omid from Hyginex. Bahram, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for inviting us here.
So, let's start off. Tell me, who's the company, what do you do, and sort of what are you doing here at the show?
Okay. So the company has a technology that solves a very critical problem for hospitals, and that is a reduction in hospital-acquired infections. Every year, hospitals lose about $40 billion when patients come in and acquire some infection that they weren't, they didn't have, so they acquired it while they're in hospital. And 70% of that's generally due to poor hand hygiene by the hospital workers. So our solution is a combination of a wearable wristband and beacons and sensors that we put inside the hospital, and collectively they work together to monitor and remind the hospital workers to wash their hands when they are required.
So it's interesting. Healthcare, medical seems to be one of the obvious markets for wearable technology based on what we've heard, based on consensus. Is that so?
That's absolutely the case. I think within a few years, I see a major transformation of the way hospitals will operate, purely driven by the fact that you have now wearable technologies inside the hospitals. The need to have just-in-time information is critical to patient care. And right now, the hospital workers, the doctors and the nurses, typically have to go back to their stations to get access to that information. I think eventually they'll be able to get it at the point of care.
I think when you talk about the enterprise space in general, when taking the consumer aspect out of wearables, the enterprise, the potential for adoption is higher, or more rapid adoption is higher, because you don't have to wait for every individual employee to want to adopt. You've got either a CTO or a CEO or some level of executive that may be driving adoption, and there's a need for that.
Correct. The need in the hospitals are obviously more than, because the ROI is a lot clearer. For example, for our system, the ROI is less than a month. So less than a month, the system pays for itself. However, there are some technical challenges you have to overcome. In consumers, everybody's focused on optimizing power, for example, for the individual use of the wristband and so on. Whereas when you're in a hospital environment, it's not just one item, it's multiple items working together collectively, and therefore you have to optimize powers amongst all of these, both the internet, the beacons that are working versus the wristbands. And there is an interplay between the two that requires optimization. So you can take advantage of technology developed in consumers, but it has to be tuned and adjusted to work properly inside the hospital environment. Off-the-shelf consumers won't drive that. So there is a need for adjustment and adoption of the technology to the hospital environment, but the value and the ROI is huge.
So it's interesting that you're talking about the use of beacons within the hospital. We heard some conversation today back in the sessions about one of the events that's going to significantly drive adoption and innovation around wearables is when our physical infrastructure, whether it be beacons or network or sensors, or video cameras in our environments become prevalent.
Correct. So going back to that discussion, as you have beacons, if you have a beacon, for example, broadcasting every 200 milliseconds or every 1 second, for a device to be able to catch that beacon, it has to scan for that period of time. And therefore, the longer it takes between each broadcast, the more battery gets used on the wristbands. If you shorten the broadcast on the beacons, the battery on the wristband lives longer, but the battery on the beacon runs out quicker. So that interplay is a very complex thing, and both of those devices are being developed without paying attention to the other side. So the beacon designers are developing it without looking at what the battery life on the wristband is going to be. And this interplay is very critical for the adoption of both, even in the consumers. If the retailers want to know where the consumers' activities are, they have to be able to pay attention to those kinds of technical difficulties.
Excellent. Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for being here at the show.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much for inviting me.